Welcome to the Backs to the Wall podcast. Four mates talking all things football with some special guests and other sporting shenanigans as well. This week on The Wall, Liverpool are Premier League champions for the first time in 30 years. Will Liverpool reach that best tally ever, currently held by Man City at 100 points? They do have a chance to do so. We'll be comparing this Liverpool side against some of the other best teams that we've seen throughout England, from the Invincibles to that Man United treble-winning side years ago. Also on the podcast this week, it's the return of our Send Him to the Reserves feature. We'll each be nominating a player and vote to send him to the reserves. And the Lockdown Accumulator returns as well. We'll be giving you our selections this week from the Premiership, the Championship, the La Liga, and the Japanese Premier League. All that and more to come on this week's Backs to the Wall podcast. So, like them or loathe them, Liverpool are Premier League champions for the first time in 30 years this season. They have taken the league with a 23-point lead over Manchester City with 7 games left to play. You'd have to say deserved from a Liverpool point of view.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think everyone's kind of been surprised just how much better they've been than everyone else. I mean, no one else has really put up a fight this season. I mean, what you said, the 20-point gap, and that team is just crazy good. Klopp's got to take most of the plaudits for assembling this team. And like his recruitment since he's joined has been sensational, really. In the summer, they only really added one player or something, and they went from the 97-point last season to now you're looking at them possibly beating Man City's tally of 100 points.
Yeah, I think you're spot on about certainly Klopp's recruitment has been pretty precise, and every player he signed has kind of fitted that vision that he has, and he got rid of players early on that he didn't think were fit for that Liverpool profile. And I think it's hard to kind of imagine that they won't surpass that 100-point tally. Who do they have remaining in their 7 games?
They still have to play Man City and Arsenal probably, and Chelsea, the best teams in there, but they've got pretty straightforward games, you'd say, on paper against Burnley, Brighton and Newcastle, probably the easiest points on the board there. But yeah, I have to back it up as well and say that they've been just fantastic this season. Just to watch, they've been scoring goals for fun, and the football's been tremendous on the eye as well. It just shows last season that they were so close to winning it. They pushed Man City right to the edge, and it was almost unfair that they didn't manage it. But they've more than came out this season and absolutely dominated. And it just shows the point distance that's between them and Man City at the minute. That Klopp's done a fantastic job. It's taken a few years to really get there, but it's definitely stuck now, and it's clicked well. So it's brilliant, and I really have enjoyed watching them.
When Klopp came in 4 years ago, did any of you see this happening, as this is a possibility?
Not really. No, I mean, it kind of came close and probably should have won it under Brendan Rodgers, but that team kind of still lacked that cutting edge. And like you say about his recruitment, it has been so good. You look at bringing players like Salah in, and people questioned when he came in that he couldn't do it, and then he went to have that like 34-goal season or something stupid like that. And then having Mane on the other wing, them two wingers running at you is just scary. One thing that's kind of helped them is Coutinho leaving as well. It's kind of enabled the rest of the squad to play kind of freer in this kind of high pressing style that Klopp has. It's kind of allowed Firmino to play this false 9 and have like more holding 3 midfielders. So kind of in the long run, him leaving, ironically, to win the Champions League and that, Liverpool have had back-to-back Champions League finals and looking like they're going to win, or have won the league now.
I've been so impressed by the wing-backs as well, from Trent Alexander-Arnold to Andy Robertson, just the way that they both get up and down that wing. Proper, sort of like the new era of right and left backs, just getting up those wings and putting in sensational balls, because they've contributed a great number of assists this season and last season, and so a couple of goals as well. So the recruitment all over the park's been fantastic. And you look as well and you see ageing James Milner often on the team sheet, and he left Man City a good few years ago now, and I thought when he left there that it would sort of be perhaps a downward progression from there, but he's really just gone from strength to strength. I mean, he's now won Champions League, Premier League. He's been brilliant.
So, as Jamie mentioned, they do actually have a couple of tricky games remaining in their running. Do you both think they will get to over that 100-point tally?
I'm not 100% sure if they will. I mean, statistically, yes, they can do it. They can get 107 points. And if they set that as a goal, then I think they will. But you look at it from the other side, it's kind of now the games aren't really important, and whether or not they'll want to get unnecessary injuries like we have been seeing in some of the games, when the next season it's going to be upon us quicker than what we might imagine.
I just think that they will. I think they'll get it over the edge. I mean, I know they've got Manchester City and Chelsea to go, and City have been firing quite well, although they did lose to Chelsea. So I think they could be deposed by Liverpool in that game. And Chelsea, of course, posed a little bit of a threat, but I just think that the Liverpool have that ambition in their heads that they really will want to go for that new record, and that'll be enough, despite already winning the league, to spur them on to win again. And the game against Arsenal as well, looking at that in the fixture list, I don't see them putting up any sort of resistance to Liverpool basically steamrolling them. Because I was talking to Andrew yesterday and talking about how they've become sort of a joke in a way. I mean, they're not obviously not in threat of being relegated or anything like that, but just when you watch them play, they just seem so nervous, and they're not the Arsenal that we were sort of used to seeing when we were growing up. So it's strange, but in my opinion, yeah, I really do think that Liverpool will hit the 100, go over the mark of Man City's record.
I think that's kind of just been the tale of the season, like just Liverpool being miles better than everyone else. They've managed to carry on their form from last year, but everyone else has just been nowhere near the standard. Like Chelsea have had their transfer ban, Man City lost company, and then they had all them centre-half injuries this season, which affected them massively. Tottenham have been poor this year, and then Man United and Arsenal have just had what we're kind of used to with Man United and Arsenal the past few years. And then I think when you're looking at eras, this squad is capable of being a real dominant force within the Premier League and kind of world football. They've had back-to-back Champions League finals with one victory now, the Super Cup. And if they do get over that 100-point mark with that City set, you're looking at possibly the best teams we've seen in Premier League history.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. How do you compare them then with some of those all-time great sides? You know, are they comparable with the Arsenal Invincibles side? Are they comparable with the Man United treble-winning team? What do you think?
If we go back to the earliest example which we're talking about there, and it's the treble-winning Manchester United side, and they were absolutely incredible. Had a fantastic Champions League win, and the league win itself was impressive. But if we're strictly going by the league, then I think the very fact that they only got 79 points in that league season, and it took them until the very last day of the season to push it over the line, just sort of shows that it's not quite as impressive, and they weren't quite as dominant in that year as Liverpool have been this year. I've been talking of them getting over 100 points. It's crazy. So it'll be over 21 points more than what that Manchester United side did as well. And I was looking at Manchester United's record in that league as well, and I know that Liverpool lost to Watford not so long ago, which was a freak result, but Manchester United in 98-99 season, they lost to like Sheffield Wednesday, Middlesbrough, and they got thumped 3-0 off Arsenal. We just haven't seen as many of those sort of standout scores for Liverpool. They've not been defeated in that way really this season. They've been almost perfect, apart from that one blip really against Watford. So I think that, in my opinion, Liverpool are better than that Man United treble winning side.
I'm not really sure. I mean, I think when you look at it as an actual achievement, that Man United treble hasn't been done since, or from an English club anyway, which kind of shows how hard that is to do. Their league form probably suffered due to their cup form. That team went on then to dominate for a few years as well, so it wasn't just a one thing. I mean, this Liverpool team, if they can back it up and win 2 or 3 titles, then fair enough, but this Man United team won again and again and again, which for me suggests it probably is one of the best teams we've seen in the league, if not the best. Because of that treble season, that kind of puts them up on kind of a pedestal above everyone else.
But I think just to add to that, though, I mean, last season Liverpool finished on 97 points, and I know they finished second. But when you look at and they won the Champions League. Liverpool won the Champions League last year, so I know they didn't win the league, but they got 97 points. Whereas Manchester United in this treble winning season of 98-99, they only had 79 points. So they didn't have quite the same domination. Although they won the league, it's hard, and I suppose people may not agree with the point I'm trying to make here, but having 97 points and winning the Champions League and then coming this season and having a over 23-point lead over second place with, 7 games to go is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably would find myself siding with Andrew more over this because, yes, Liverpool won the Champions League last year and they had that really amazing points tally, 97 points in the league, but they get knocked out of the cup this year off Chelsea. Then they're put out of the Champions League this year by Atletico Madrid, and that's an Atletico Madrid team I think they should be beaten. So I just think when you look at consistency, I mean, yes, it's great that they I think they will surpass 100 points, but for me, it's I think as Andrew says, does your league form suffer to a certain degree because you're in the FA Cup and you're in Europe, and I think it's hard to say that they could be a better side than that treble winning team.
Another thing that people are going to look back on now is the fact we've had this break because of the virus. People aren't going to hold this season in such high regard because of the break. It's just going to be one of those things. It kind of almost like downgrades their achievement because of what's went on.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. There is a chance that we remember this season more for the league being postponed and for all the coronavirus and that sort of thing, and that maybe does take away slightly from Liverpool's achievement. But I mean, it has to be said, if they get over 100 points, it really is extraordinary.
Well, I think this would be a good point then to move on to statistically who's the best Premier League team in history, and that's Manchester City getting their 100 points record a couple of seasons back. So, yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on comparing Liverpool to that great Manchester City side who were so impressive during that whole campaign?
You can't really say anything else. They were just unreal that season. It was Guardiola's second season, and that's when he kind of implemented his style of play into the game, brought in a few more players to kind of change the team around. Yeah, getting 100 points, 19 consecutive wins, the most away points, 106 goals scored. It's just so impressive. Then we could be looking at Liverpool beating that record, which Liverpool would be a better team than that. Another thing about that Man City side, which he's kind of comparing it to Liverpool, is they backed it up with another title. I think that's kind of what you've got to do these days. You've got to back up with more and more titles. Man City went the next season and got 98 points, which is the second highest points tally we've ever seen. And they won the domestic treble, being the first English side to do so. I think in order for Liverpool to reach that potential of being better than them, then they're going to have to go ahead and win 2, 3, 4 more titles in the next few years.
Now, if we turn back the clocks a wee bit and go back to the 03-04 season, to the brilliant Arsenal Invincibles, that was a season which really stands out in the record books, obviously, because for that achievement, and we've not seen it again since in the league. So that's going to be a really interesting talking point. And I know that they didn't have the same points tally. They had quite a few draws in there, but just the fact that they didn't lose a single game, and Liverpool have lost that game to Watford this season. What's sort of your thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, it was an amazing team. No one would debate that, and they'll always stand apart for that reason. But you have to remember as well that they drew 12 matches. That for me, I wouldn't care if they'd lost to Watford. The Liverpool have won the league by a stupid amount of points, and for me, no question, I think the Liverpool side's better than that Arsenal Invincibles team.
Yeah, I think I've kind of got to agree. Like, the Invincible season was such a good achievement, and it's not been done again because it was so hard. But the Arsenal team kind of got that in the mentality towards the end, and like Michael said, drawing 12 games. For me, that Invincible team doesn't get in the top 3, maybe top 5 best Premier League teams we've seen, as I think the mentality was all wrong towards the end, and that was their only cup that year, and that was the last major trophy we've seen them win for a good few years.
Yeah, looking at the league table now, and you see that Liverpool have drawn 2 games and lost 1 this season, as opposed to Arsenal drawn 12 in the 03-04 season. I think that just speaks volumes as to how easy it was for Liverpool to really steamroll teams this season, and that's one of the reasons as well that I think that Liverpool have to be held in a higher regard than that Arsenal invincible team. And that's
so are there any other sides that you'd like to mention? I know Jose Mourinho's first side at Chelsea, the 04-05 team, they won the league. They had a pretty high points tally as well.
Yes, Mourinho's Chelsea got 95 points that season and also won the League Cup, as well as reaching the Champions League semi-finals. Mourinho kind of delivered that year, stating he was the special one. They only lost one game that came in October, and they really were a great team.
I think another honourable mention for me would be the sort of one of Ferguson's last really good Manchester United sides, and it was the 2007-08 season when I know we're talking about points a lot here, but they got 89 points, and they also obviously won that famous Champions League final against Chelsea, and that was also second of 3 Premier League wins that they had. So another really impressive group of players playing there, and again, I think I'll have to put Liverpool ahead of them, just going by how much I've really enjoyed watching the football that they've been playing, and again, just going back to that points tally and how they're able to attain such a vast number of wins.
Yeah, I think we could be looking at this Liverpool team being one of the greatest we have seen if they go on to dominate. I suppose the one thing that's kind of more frustrating as a viewer of them is how they've kind of disregarded the domestic cup competitions in the past few years. I think a few games Klopp hasn't even managed. I know this year with the Super Cup it was kind of the clashing, but constantly they've fielded weakened teams in the cups early on, got knocked out, and I think if they went on to win a couple of FA Cups or League Cups, that would kind of push them above some of these teams.
One thing that might be interesting, just on that note, who do you think is going to win the league next season? Who would you make? What's your prediction now?
Man City will step it up. They'll go ahead and spend some stupid money on a centre half like they need to, and I reckon they'll probably be back to more of their best. And you kind of look at Chelsea with their transfer ban being lifted. They've signed a couple of decent players in that Timo Werner and a few others there. They could be in amongst it as well. I
think it's an interesting point that Andrew makes about money there, because on my notes that I have about the Arsenal invincible season, in that season Manchester City had the longest winless run. They had 14 matches in a row where they didn't find 3 points, and it just shows you that when they got bought over around 2008 and got all that money invested in, it just shows you how far you can come today. And in my head, I think that Liverpool will win next season just because they've got such a great core in that squad. But it wouldn't overly surprise me too much if Guardiola gets an insane amount of money to go out and do a bit of shopping in the transfer market, and they come out next season and win it just simply because they have that extra cash flow in the background.
Yeah, interesting. I think I'd probably be drawn towards Man City as well. I think Chelsea are worth a shout, but now they might take Frank another season or two to get them up to that. You know, you think it took Klopp 4 years, but I think Man City next season, as much as I hate to say it, I think they'll get back to winning ways. Actually, before we do move on to our reserves feature, I suppose it's worth just saying thanks to Peter McDonald, for joining us on the podcast last week. And we did have some concern from a few of the listeners who thought that Jamie was standing for the entire 1 hour and 20 minutes that we were speaking to Peter, and I also thought this as well. So maybe Jamie, you could clear that up for us. Why were you standing, or if you weren't standing, how do you have such good posture?
You know, it wasn't until about an hour ago that I found out that some people had been asking Andrew if I was standing, and then Michael, you thought as well that I had been. No, but basically there's a desk in the room I'm in here that has a stool. So I was sitting on a stool and my camera was sort of facing up towards me, so it looked like I was standing. But honestly, it was horrendous for my back, and my posture suffered since. If Peter comes back on the show, I'll certainly be finding myself a hard-back chair.
Well, thank goodness for that. That's now been cleared up. We can all sleep soundly this evening. So we'll move on to our reserves feature. We each nominate a player who we think has been particularly poor on or off the pitch, and then vote to send one of them to the reserves. So who's getting us underway?
This week I'm going for David Luiz. I think for everyone who's watched the return of the Premier League, my nomination is pretty self-explanatory. I think he probably had the worst performance ever a substitute has had in the history of the Premier League, having been at fault for Man City's first goal and then being shown a red card, which resulted in a Man City penalty. And then Man City got 2-0, ultimately winning 3-0. He's been error-prone all year. I think I've seen that he gave away 4 penalties, and then to sum a season up, he went off injured at the weekend in the FA Cup. It was kind of a weird signing for Arsenal. He signed for 8 million, but only got a year contract, earning like a reported 125,000 a week. And I think just for that Man City game alone, he should be sent to the reserves. But he's probably one of the most overrated centre halves in the current game, maybe in the Premier League. He just takes too many risks, and he's not really suited to the English game. He's probably more suited to a holding role if he's going to play in England. And clubs have paid an incredible 106 million for his services in transfer fees alone, and I can only imagine that's doubled if you think of wages included in that. And it kind of just sums up Arsenal again, giving him a new contract. Yeah, for Luiz's abysmal start to the return of the Premier League, I think he has to go to the reserves.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in here because I'm frustrated that I haven't picked him. This was one of the most bizarre decisions I have ever seen, to give a player another, what was it, a 12-month extension he got, and he can't be on peanuts either. He must be on like over 100 grand.
Yeah,
I mean,
crazy.
he just cannot be. If David Luiz is a defender, then there's still a chance for me to make it in the game, because that was one of the worst defensive performances I have ever seen in the Premier League. I'm willing to say that, and they go out and give him another contract. It's beyond me.
I think kind of a worrying thing is for Arsenal fans, Arteta's meant to be their like saving grace, and if he's viewing Luiz as being critical for next season, it doesn't really look great.
You think they'd be able to put their money elsewhere? I mean, you could dip into the transfer market, and yeah, I'm sorry, but looking at how good David Luiz has been, you could find a better centre half for not a great deal of money, or even in the Arsenal academy. Is there no better young centre half that could sort of step up and take his place in the team and force him out the door?
Jamie, who are you nominating to send to the reserves this week?
Now, I know that this one's going to have a lot of controversy, especially from Michael and perhaps fellow Northern Irish listeners that we have. But I've gone with one of the best footballers that Britain has ever seen, with George Best. Now, the reason that I've nominated George Best is that a few years ago I noticed in, I think, an article that I was reading, and then I looked online and saw a couple of videos of horrendous challenges that Best was sort of renowned for doing, especially when he started to lose out of his pace throughout his career. And he also had a bit of a problem with theft and assault. But if we go back to 1970, and the headline in one of the main newspapers back then was "Best booked as City star is crippled." I watched an interview with the then Manchester City manager Malcolm Allison, and it was during a Manchester derby where Best absolutely flies into against a guy called Glenn, and it's horrendous. He's mistouched it, and it's gone in front of him, and Glenn's got there first, and he's flown in and snapped his completely snapped his leg. And what I heard as well is that Glenn Pardew got taken to the hospital, and they actually thought that they weren't going to be able to save his leg because the circulation was so poor, and they thought they were going to have to take it off. And this took 2 years out of the career of Glenn Pardew, and he was sort of a star player for Manchester City at that time, and they forced him onto the sidelines, and he never fully recovered after that. He did play for 4 years longer, but he decided to take sort of early retirement at 30 because he just never managed to hold down his place in that City side. But one crazy tackle and breaking someone's leg, you can sort of look at it as an unfortunate event in someone's career, but when it didn't just happen once. If you fast forward to 1977, and this is the one that I was making reference to when he started to maybe lose his pace a bit, and it was a guy called Ian Evans, and again, it's horrendous to watch the video of it. The George Best just flies into a tackle, and it breaks his right leg. And initially, when he broke Glenn Pardew's leg, he apologised and went into the dressing room, tried to find him afterwards, and you could tell he was really sorry. But for the Ian Evans one, apparently he's never said sorry to this day and hasn't shown any remorse in causing a guy to sit on the sidelines for 2 years. And people who were at that game, I read as well, they heard the bones snapping in the stands, and it was absolutely hellish. But I've got a little bit more to say here as well. That he was also sent off the Home Nations League when that used to be a thing in the British Isles. In 1970, Scotland beat Northern Ireland 1-0, and Best is in a disagreement with the referee, and you see him running up to him in the video, and he spits at him and then grabs mud off the ground and throws it in his face, and he gets sent off. Now, this is to add to multiple arrests over the course of his career and thereafter. He assaulted a police officer. He was involved in bar brawls. He stole a fur coat and passport. And when he went out to play in America, he did have some severe drinking problems when he was there. But apparently he stole all the money from a woman's purse one evening to fund a binge drinking session on a Tuesday evening with some of his pals. So I know George Best is seen in such a positive light for the great talent that he was in the game, but he's got so much on another side. And I'm not just talking about the alcohol side. I'm just talking about had such a disciplinary issue throughout his career, and I think he's a shoe-in for the reserves this week.
Andrew, do you want to comment on that? Because I'm absolutely aghast.
It's certainly a surprising nomination. I'll give him that. I think we gave George a bit of stick a few weeks ago for nominating Alan Shearer, and Alan Shearer's probably not in the ilk that's mentioned with George Best when it comes to football. So I think
it is literally one of the most iconic and naturally gifted footballers we've ever witnessed. Pele himself described George Best as the greatest footballer in the world. And I mean, to even have his name mentioned in the same sentence as the Backs to the Wall podcast reserves, I find quite frankly disgusting.
He might play quite well with Chris Iwelumo up front, though.
But I've got a strong case. He had an absolutely appalling record at breaking folks' legs.
I'll bring some normality and decorum back to the podcast. It's fitting that Liverpool have won the league. I'm actually nominating an ex-player who nearly won them the league title single-handedly in 2014. And this is a player that we did mention in one of might in fact have been the first episode of the podcast. It's none other than Luis Suarez. As Scott would have said, it's the most famous set of teeth in English football. He's beaten opponents on 3 separate occasions: Otman Bakel of PSV Eindhoven, Branislav Ivanovic of Chelsea, and most recently, while playing for Uruguay in the World Cup, he, of course, bit Giorgio Chiellini. But I'd like to take you back to 2010, the World Cup quarter-final, Uruguay versus Ghana. And in the match, Ghana held a 1-0 lead at half-time after a long strike from Suleiman Tari. This goal would be cancelled out in the second half by Diego Forlan. And the entire match, however, would be remembered for one moment, and that was Luis Suarez's handball on the line. He swiped it, almost swatted it off the line in the dying embers of the match. And even if he would be sent off, Asamoah Gyan would miss the last second penalty. It rattled off the bar, and Uruguay went on to win the game on penalties. Possibly the worst part of this is Suarez has not been and never was in any way apologetic for his antics. He in fact said, "I made the best save of the tournament. The hand of God now belongs to me." I'll never be able to forgive him for this. Asamoah Gyan was ridiculed all around the world for the miss, and even though Asamoah now says that he's since forgiven Luis Suarez, I definitely have not. And he definitely deserves a place on the Backs to the Wall reserves bench.
I think I'm going to struggle not to side with you on this one, Michael, if I'm going to stay away from George Best, because I remember watching that game, and I'm a sucker for an underdog doing well. And when Ghana were playing so well, and when Suarez handled the ball on the line and stopped a certain goal, I just honestly, my heart was in my mouth. At the same time, it's one of the most scandalous things I ever remember watching.
Yeah, I think Luis Suarez is probably one of the more hated players in the current game. But with these 3 players we've nominated, it's probably the 3 best we've ever seen in a trio of nominations for the reserves. Usually it's because of their poor qualities on the field, but all 3 have had a half-decent career, to say the least. I think David Luiz still gets a decent shout, but I'm not voting for my own, so I'm going to have to go Luis Suarez on this one.
Yes, well, that indeed means that Luis Suarez will be sent to the reserves. Thankfully, he joins an illustrious group. I would have gone for David Luiz there, but just baffles me, as I said, his contract extension, and I'm glad now that we can move on and forget that George Best was ever even mentioned. In fact, possibly we could edit this out because I'm still just flabbergasted.
That's like me being annoyed that Lee Cattermole was nominated. That's kind of in the same vein.
No, it's not. It's not in the same vein. Anyway.
I spent hours getting notes for this case. I think he's a great candidate to get put to the reserves. His record speaks for itself. This is off the field. This is not actually just off the field. I mean, his antics both on and off for his whole career. I think he's a fitting or a shoe-in. He's a shoe-in for the reserves.
Like I say, we're going to move on because I'll not sleep tonight. So, plenty of football now to bet on, and it's still called the Lockdown Accumulator, even though we're kind of getting back to normal. But betting this week on Premier League, the Championship, La Liga, and J League. So I've got a really juicy quad lined up. Andrew, what's your selections?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm still heartbroken from a couple of weeks ago on our last one. Bristol City let me down for £170. I think I've been sick every morning since then. But I'm going Brighton to beat Norwich away in the Premier League. In the Championship, I have Cardiff to beat Bristol City this time. Bristol City will probably win though. I've got Valencia to beat Granada in La Liga, and in the J League, I have Yokohama F Marinos to beat Urawa Red Diamonds. £5 gets you £156.75.
Very nice, Jamie. Let's hear yours.
Yeah, I've not been so fortunate over the last few weeks. My selections seem to be letting me down every week, but I've gone Wolves to beat Arsenal just because my faith in Arsenal pulling any sort of spectaculars out the bag has completely gone out the window. So yeah, Wolves to beat them. I've gone for Fulham to beat Birmingham in the English Championship. I've got, same as Andrew, I've got Valencia to beat Granada in Spain. And I've gone for Consadole Sapporo to beat Yokohama in the Japanese J League. And £5 gets you back £108.28.
Very nice. Premier League's tricky. On Saturday, certainly, I struggled to pick a team, and I actually have been bold here, and it's in Mikel Arteta we trust. I'm gonna side with Arsenal away to Wolves. A brave decision, but in the Championship, siding again with Michael O'Neill's Stoke. They're at home to Barnsley. In La Liga, that makes 3 picks for Valencia away to Granada. And in the Japanese J League, I've gone for Nagoya Grampus 8. They are away to Shimizu S-Pulse. So a £5 quad will return £202.95. That would be nice.
It would be nice. I think we're all on about, what are we on? -20, -25 there?
I think it must be at -25.
Yeah.
We're really giving out sound betting advice.
Before we move on, I'll just tell this slightly amusing story, is that before we started up this podcast, I'd actually given up online betting for about 3 years because I was trying to obviously make a profit like we all do, and I was betting on football and what have you, and I'd gone into minus like £2. I was about £2 under, and I saw that there was a tennis match being played, and I can't even remember who was playing, but one of the boys was winning 4 games to 1 in one of the sets, and I decided to stick about £32 on that guy to win the set, being 4-1 up, and he chucked it away and lost the set 6-4, and in my anger I decided to delete my betting account. So it was only for this podcast that I decided to come back, and it just shows you that my betting techniques don't really get you far, but that's a story that I had about my history of betting.
No, I don't think any of us are particularly fortunate when it comes to betting. I seem to remember Arsenal letting me down for about £100 when they were 3-0 up against Anderlecht in the Champions League, and they threw that away. Still not forgiving them.
Yeah, I'm just simply one of the most unlucky people you could ever meet. But on that train of thought, it's always important to remember the Backs to the Wall podcast, of course, encourages responsible gambling. So that wraps things up on this week's episode of the Backs to the Wall podcast. As always, thanks very much for listening. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Do get in touch with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're on YouTube as well. Remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. Do subscribe and leave a review. So thanks very much for listening, and we hope to see you all very soon.
We're going straight to the reserves, Geordie Best. Going on up to the spirit in the sky.
John Pansel for Ghana with what in all likelihood will be the last kick of the match. Here we go. Boateng's there. Keeper's lost it. Happy is there. Blocked on the line. Blocked on the line again. Has it gone in? Flag goes up. And Ghana think they've got it. Ghana think they've scored. And the officials are going to have to step in here. Well, it's a red card. It's been blocked on the line. Does this mean Ghana have got a penalty with the last kick of the game? Oh, I do not believe it. What drama! It's Suarez on the line, the striker. Look at that as he beats it away, volleyball style. Suarez is off. What a moment for Asamoah Gyan. What pressure on those shoulders. Suarez leaves the field in tears. Asamoah Gyan for Ghana. Oh, and he's missed. Oh, I cannot believe it. And it was the last kick of the game. And Asamoah Gyan cannot finish Uruguay